Well, good morning, everyone. Okay. Is everyone ready? Okay, awesome. Well, good morning. Thanks for being here. Today I want to address the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, election preparations, and cover a few other points. This is important to us, and this is important for our voters. I want every voter in Georgia to know every vote matters, because every voter matters. We all know that Hurricane Helene was a massive storm affecting a large area of both the southern and eastern parts of Georgia. It seemed like Helene spent 2 or 3 weeks making her good sweet time to get here, and little did we know that when she came ashore at the Big Bend, she would still be packing a huge wallop once she got to Georgia. She hit Valdosta hard 10 days ago and then traveled on a path through Dublin, Augusta, the South Carolina Piedmont, and then on to Asheville. What has been on everyone's mind is what will happen to elections. Good news, absentee ballots are going out this week as scheduled, and early voting will start next Tuesday on October 15th. Before our team and I go into the details, I want to pause and I want to recognize our election team. I believe we have the best election team in America. I can't express my gratitude and my admiration for their foresight, their planning, their diligence, professionalism, and just darn caring about the whole entire election process. Our state elections director, Blake Evans, is outstanding. He represents the very best of public service. I think public service is an integral part of the election process. And then Gabe Sterling here is also, and you all know him, and he has been working closely with Blake and the elections team in the past 10 days. Also here will be Nuzla Zaharis, our Securities and Charities Division, who makes sure at all times, and especially during times of national and state emergencies, that charities are good charities, and we have to look out for scams that are trying to take advantage of people during these trying times. Also, our General Counsel, Charlene McGowan's here, in case you want to ask any of those detailed legal type questions. Before Helene even hit, Blake Evans and our elections division had sent out to the county election offices a survey checklist. Told them to hold on to it and report back after the storm to let us know where the status of your counties are. Last Monday, this time, I was in Augusta with Governor Kemp and other constitutional officers as he was assessing the damage, and it was devastating. The first thing I noticed when I got off on I-20 is that none of the stoplights worked. They didn't start seeing some of them working until I got close to downtown Augusta. Not all of them worked, but some of them did. The Columbia County Commission chairman showed a little map of where the storm clouds were less than a mile from his house. It was clocked at 102.9 miles per hour. That's the kind of storm they had over in the Augustan region. On Tuesday, I was in Nashville and Berrien County, South Georgia, then Douglas, then Hazelhurst and Jeff Davis County, and we finished up in Alamo and Wheeler County. Power outages, lights out, trees on houses. For example, in Jeff Davis last week, 92.35% of the power was out in that county. On Wednesday, I was in Sandersville, in Washington County, Louisville in Jefferson County, Gibson in Glasscock, and Thompson McDuffie. What was really interesting when I was in Gibson County, lo and behold, there was the county election director working in the sheriff's department because it had internet. And what she was concerned about is she had 11 people. She needed to get those 11 people new registrations on the voter list. And then if she's already thinking ahead, now how do I get them their cards so that they know they are registered? But that's the type of dedication we've seen throughout the entire state of Georgia. I'm grateful for every one of our county election directors. They really put public service first because they understand how important voting is. 53 counties so far have been declared federal disaster areas, and that probably will go up over a period of time. Our office is working hard to make sure the counties have what they need so it can go off without a hitch. And to think about Jenkins County, the windows were blown out, didn't damage any of the equipment, put some plywood on the window, they'll be good to go. I think that's really what the spirit of America is, it's resiliency. What we do is we put our head down, put our shoulder to the wheel, and we just do our job. And that's what you can count on in our office, and that's what you can count on in the counties. So prior to Helene, the counties had actually begun their pre-election testing processes of equipment and facilities to be used for the 2024 election. The storm had knocked out the power and the cell service across many of those counties, and without that power, the process had to be put on hold. That'll be restarting, here shortly. I want to thank publicly Governor Kemp for his leadership during this crisis. He has made sure that whatever we need from Georgia's Emergency Management Agency, we get it. Chris Stallings, the director, has just been a champ to work with, and his entire team. We actually started having calls with our elections team and GMA right after the storm hit, all last weekend, the weekend before, the first weekend after the storm. They were having several calls, Zoom calls, things like that, kind of assessing where we were. We're just really grateful for that. It was also a massive and deadly storm, and recovery is going to take a long time. Like you, I grieve the loss of life. It's tragic what happened. May the Lord be with their families and help them through this difficult moment. We appreciate Governor Kemp prioritizing the response to Hurricane Helene. As I said last week, we're going to be ready by Tuesday, October 15th, to start early voting, and absentee ballots are going out this week. Any changes will be announced through my voter page, because we may have to move a few of those voting locations around. And local election officials also will use local and social media to announce any changes that are required in voting location. The most important thing I would tell voters is make your plan to vote. How are you going to vote? Decide on whether you're going to vote early, are you going to vote absentee, or you're going to vote on election day. Make your plan. And today is the last day to register. So if you want to be registered and you aren't, go ahead and register. If you have any questions, go to mvp.sos.ga.gov. But I do want to address another troubling issue that we've seen coming out of Helene. And it makes me boiling mad, and I know it does you too. We're starting to see some scam artists out there preying on people that have just suffered the misfortune of losing their roof, losing their house, losing their possessions. One Georgian mentioned to me when I was out there last week that someone came by a house and there's 4 or 5 trees on there. He says, well, I can bring a crane out here for $35,000 to take those trees off there. Now, how many people do you think have $35,000 just sitting in the bank? And that's the kind of stuff we will shut down immediately. Nuala Zaharis will be here after bring up Blake, and she'll answer any questions about things such that matter. We're really grateful that you're here today so you can get out the message. Voting will start on 10, and we want everyone to listen to what Blake has to say. Blake, if you want to come on up, and he's going to flesh out the details as we stand on elections. Then after Blake, we'll have Nuala come up, Gabe Sterling, and then we'll take questions from any of you because I know you'll have some questions. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everybody. So to start first with the county election officials and their recovery from the hurricane, one of the most significant issues they saw first and foremost was in their personal lives and having to get through down trees and closed rows and check on their family to get back into the office and start checking things. And so we've been keeping them in our prayers as they've gotten back to work. But what we found is that for the most part, county election offices have been spared. There's been minimal damage to those. The Secretary mentioned that in Jenkins County they had some damage to an exterior wall. But as far as election equipment across the state, all that was safe and secure the entire time. And also, they've been dealing with, county election officials have been dealing with power outages, obviously, and loss of internet connection. That has been gradually coming back. And I want to say specifically a thank you, as the Secretary said, to Georgia Emergency Management Agency, as they have helped us with prioritizing the addresses of county election offices to ensure that they are getting their power back. And as we sit here this morning, we can say that there are minimal, if any, power outages to election offices across the state. And where there might be, for example, we know Columbia County has multiple locations. They have one of their locations running off of a generator, so they still have power in those facilities. Those counties were obviously already preparing for the election. The Secretary mentioned logic and accuracy testing of equipment. That has resumed in many cases, and also poll worker training has resumed in many counties. Counties are still assessing their election day polling location. We have about 2,400 election day polling locations. Many of those were in the path of the storm. What we know right now is that Lowndes County is going to have to change at least one of their locations. We know that Richmond County has at least one location that they're going to need to change, and Columbia County has at least one that they're going to change. But it does take time to get out and assess these. County election officials were dealing with road closures, down trees, and also, as I mentioned earlier, the power outages. When a county goes out to a polling location, they have to check not just the structure of the facility, but also things like parking and also the power and electricity that's running there to make sure that it's sufficient to supply the power to the voting machines. And so they need to get in there and perform some tests. And so it's taking a little bit of time, but I do expect with every day that passes this week, we're going to know more and more. Right now, I mentioned those 3 polling location changes that we know are going to be coming down the pipe, and as we find out about those, we'll post those on our website. The Secretary mentioned that voters can go to mbp.sos.ga.gov and find their most recent or most up-to-date polling location information there. But as I mentioned, except for power and internet outages and that one incident in Jenkins County, for the most part, we've seen minimal to no damage to election offices themselves, which has been helpful. And we have, as the Secretary mentioned, very, very dedicated county election officials. I was talking to Jefferson County this morning. Their registrar, their offices are still closed to the public, but today is the voter registration deadline. And so she has a table that's set up outside of her one of her county offices that does happen to be open today, and she is there to register voters as they come up on the voter registration deadline, and she's registered 2 already this morning. So we've seen just so many instances of county election officials and registrars that have been working the weekends, working nights to ensure that everything stays on schedule with the election calendar. So we're very, very thankful for them and for that. Now what I'm going to do is just give an outlook, a broader outlook on preparations for the upcoming election. Poll worker training is ongoing. Logic and accuracy testing is ongoing. Right now, as we sit, we have just over 7.1 million active voters on the voter registration rolls. And that in addition to that, we have a little over 1 million inactive voters on the voter registration rolls, for a total of 8.2 million total voters on the rolls. And that number is going to continue to change a little bit. Today's the voter registration deadline, so a voter can go to online voter registration. They can go to their My Voter page up until 11:59 tonight and submit a change request. And then counties in the days following are going to be processing those requests as we get ready for advanced voting. And so that number is going to continue to change a little bit, even though today is the voter registration deadline. Just for comparison purposes, in 2020 we had right under 7.2 million active voters and right over 7.6 million total voters. And for also a few more statistics, because I'm a data guy and I want to share them, is with all the voter registration applications and requests that we receive, about 70%, or just under 70%, come through the Department of Driver Services when we get a transaction from them. 12% come through our online portals, OLVR, Online Voter Registration, and My Voter Page. And then about 19% come through some sort of paper application. And as I mentioned, today is the voter registration deadline, but counties are going to continue to process. We know that there are still about 100,000 registration change requests that are sitting on that our counties have that they are going to be processing over the coming days, and so we expect that number of active voters to get up to probably close to 7.2 million by the time we get ready for voting. And so with that, what I'm going to do now is turn it over to Nuala for her update.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Blake. Good morning, everyone. The Georgia Secretary of State's office oversees the charity space and the investment space, and we are here to support the legitimate good businesses that work as charitable organizations and those that do investment and investment firms. But we are also here to protect our donors and investors. Georgians helping Georgians is one of the things that Georgians do best. And during this time, it includes Georgians giving donations to charitable organizations that support the victims of Helene. Charitable organizations in Georgia do amazing work service in helping the public. However, we have bad actors, and there is charity fraud scams that come in many forms and typically during times when people and communities are in need. Our office wants to raise awareness against these fake charity organizations. We ask that you be vigilant, that you do your research on these organizations before you give. You can visit our Georgia Secretary of State's website at the charities page at www.sos.ga.gov to find charity giving tips. We encourage our Georgians to contact our division if they receive suspicious charitable solicitations. And to report that activity, you can call us at 470-312-2640. In addition to bad actors preying on you to donate, bad actors are also out there soliciting your money for investment purposes. Lots of opportunities to invest in this recovery pop up. The Georgia Secretary of State is warning the public that there has been an increase in these scams involving fraudsters posing as legitimate businesses or government agencies. Whether it is donor fraud or investor fraud, we ask that you be on alert from any messages coming from businesses that use misleading information to primarily solicit monies from you. They may pose as impersonators of genuine firms and bogus regulators who claim to be from government agencies or affiliates. If you are unsure or want to report, again, please contact our division at 470-312-2640. Thank you.
Good morning. Long time no see. Blake took a lot of my numbers, so he left me a few to go into this. And one of the specific things we need to talk about is today is a voter registration deadline. But there are many people out there who need to understand that does not mean that we have a locked voter list. And to be specific about that, because of some of the delays in some of the counties and some of just volume delays, because since the change in nominee for the Democrat Party, we've seen a lot of activity on one side. The counties have this to process as of this morning. To Blake's point, we have 7,120,525 active voters, 1,080,606 inactive voters as of this morning. On online voter registration, on the dashboards for the counties, there are 51,000 applications to process. DDS applications is when people come into the Department of Driver Services and either get a new license or renew or change their licenses. Is 34,000 applications to be reviewed by the counties. And on the My Voter page, voter change requests, if they want to change their addresses internally that way, 21,000 of them. Now, that doesn't mean all of them are going to come on. And it doesn't mean we know how many will come in the rest of the day. And the other unknowable unknown is the paper applications. If paper applications come into the county or come into the state by today, they're on time. And this is sort of a pre-bunking to those conspiracy theorists out there. Just because the voter list changes after today, that's not fraud, that's processing, okay? And secondarily, the list will continue to change, because you know what else happens all the time, unfortunately? People pass away. And they will be removed from the list once we get that data. That processing does not stop. So we have to keep that in mind. There's people out there who think there's a locked voter list. There is no such thing. It will be slightly different every single day because counties address these things differently. And just because there's a processing date after today doesn't mean that's an illegal registrant. It means that they got it in. So if you go on the online voter registration and you did it on September 12th is your voter registration date. It is not the date when a clerk in a county got to it. We want to make sure people understand that. As the Secretary pointed out, we have absentee ballots going out starting today. They can go out all the way through Friday for existing requests. And right now we stand at 219,930 requests. And we have 1,422 fully accepted absentees that have come in. Those are from the subset of UACAVA, which is the overseas and military votes that we have, that have already been returned because we began sending those out 49 days before the election. Another thing that's pointed out is we have a specific website for disaster recovery. If you've been affected by Helene, you can go, it's on the home page for the Secretary at sos.ga.gov. And another thing we're trying to do to continue our transparency is if anybody wants to watch both the voter registration files and the absentee processing, and when we start early voting next week, early vote numbers, they can go to our data hub page, which you go to the elections page, then you go find the data hub. The address is too long for me to say out loud and I'll get it wrong, but it's just go to the elections page and then go to data hub. It's a little tile at the end or on the corner, depending on your machine or on your phone. So those are the places you can go, because what we're dedicated to in this election especially is transparency and efficiency, because to reemphasize what the Secretary said at the beginning of this conference, every vote matters because every voter matters. So with that, we want to go and take any questions y'all might have based mainly on Helene, but any other kind of elections related stuff. Archith. There's obviously going to be some concerns about it, considering we're still in the hurricane season right now, but the county elections offices have already begun working with their county employees, and they are continuing to process. We don't manage that from up here. That is a local issue, and we have conversations every single day. And let me reemphasize something that both Blake and the Secretary said. We have literally talked to GMA once or twice a day, every day since the storm hit. We have constant communications. We had another call on Friday with our federal partners from FEMA, CISA, and the USPS talking about that. Right now, there are closures of a handful of offices still for USPS, and we're still trying to assess the routes that affect a little less than 700 absentee ballots. We're working on either those voters able to pick them up from another neighboring post office or an alternative means of delivery to make sure they get out this week and follow the law. So what we're trying to do in all this is follow the law. There have been some requests from some quarters that we need to extend deadlines. So far, we've seen no need to do that, which is a good thing. Secondarily, we have no legal authority to extend the registration deadline or the absentee request deadline. And we feel like we have enough time ahead of ourselves to be able to have everybody make a good plan to protect their own vote and protect their registration. What else? Sam. What are you talking about?
How you guys are thinking about that environment as it relates to disaster recovery, but elections in the coming years?
Look, Sam, it's kind of like the old commercial. We're soaking in it. I mean, it's just sort of always there. Our main goal is to be transparent, be honest, and follow the law and follow the Constitution to make sure that every voter that wants to cast a vote can cast it the way they want to. So that's all we can do. We cannot compete against every bit of misinformation, disinformation, but we're trying to do that with press conferences like this today. Yes?
Shared in Congress that absentee ballots
We talk to governors of the post office. We have constant communication with our contacts here. They are deploying additional resources. They have already made the decision to suspend the modernization program, which is part of the problem we had in the June situation. And they are closely tracking each one of the routes. We're still waiting to get a full understanding of the routes that may not be able to be passable because of things like Blake said, trees down, power outages, and things like that. Look, if I'm voting absentee, I have to get it from the USPS. I don't have to send it back to the USPS. If I'm homebound, I can get a caregiver or a family member to return it to a drop box or to the county office. And normally they're going to be co-located in 130 out of the 159 counties that we have. If I'm getting an absentee ballot and I feel like I have to vote that way, I will take it or have somebody who can legally carry it for me to take it. That's what I would recommend doing, because why take the risk with your vote? The other thing you can do, which is what most Georgians do, 60 to 65% are going to show up and vote in person early. And that is the best way, because you can plan your vote. And if you're in a major metro area, they have wait times on their websites to show you how long the waits are, so you don't all have to go on day one and wait in line for 3 hours and say, wow, I waited for 3 hours. It's like when you go buy an Apple iPhone on the first day, you're going to wait in line. But now we have tools and availability to do that. So absentee ballot is still a good way to vote. The safest thing to do with it is when you get it, have a person you know or you yourself drop it off, either a family member or a caregiver, to be within the law in Georgia. Yes, Dieter.
People are looking at it, so you have some people, like you said, who like to vote via, who like to vote absentee. But in those communities that have been really affected by the storm, right, you hear some folks who suggestions, maybe consider doing it a different way this year, or that plan.
The fortunate thing is right now we're only aware of 3 out of 2,400 actual election day locations that have been affected. So that's a great thing. It means the vast majority of voters can avoid those kind of issues. But we do still I still love the idea of making your vote and doing it early and vote. If you are an election day voter and you're one of these counties, Columbia, Richmond, Lowndes, we talked about, and there may be others. Counties are small, have less assets, are still trying to figure out what's going on, and they can't, like Blake said, you can't know for certain if a facility is usable if you can't test all the power. But that's why we have My Voter page, and that's why we have the disaster recovery page. We're trying to give people information to make a plan to vote. We've been telling people that make your plan. It is up to you to make those decisions. It's not up to the secretary or the county elections official or your local elected official to grab you and carry you to the polls. You have to have some agency yourself to take care of those things. Yes, sir.
Is there anywhere that you're expecting any delays in absentee or early voting?
Early voting right now, we don't expect any delays. Like I said, there's a handful of locations that are USPS offices that cannot deliver anything, but some of them are onesie-twosies. Like there's 27 counties that are impacted, but the plurality of them only have 1 vote that is impacted. But places like Bacon County, the entire county is not delivering right now. So we're having to look for maybe a UPS as a backup for those things. But everything, our intent is working with the counties is to make sure everything follows the law and every request we have on file this week gets mailed this week. Yes, ma'am. They are going to be tied directly to early voting locations, and so far every early voting location we have been, through our inventory, Blake, that's correct, they're all pretty much good to go. We're not aware of any right now, and if they would probably be Columbia, Richmond, or Lowndes, because those are most impacted, or in Trutland or Toombs County. But so far we've seen the good part. When we're dealing with GEMA, one of the first things they were doing was trying to get the 911 centers back up, and they're either co-located or near-located to most of our election centers in rural Georgia, so they had power, they have access, so for the most part we've seen no issues around that. Yes, sir.
Roads are open. Roads are open.
Yeah. Look, most of the roads are already open. I mean, our big fear we had in a conversation with our federal and state partners on Friday was if another storm comes through. And we're trying to get ahead of that using other things for cellular connections and power connections and generators. We have that conversation every single day. But as of right now, I think most people have enough time. The bad part is the storm hit it all. The good part is it hit far enough out for us to be able to recover and make plans. So I think most people should be okay. I'm thankful we're not Western North Carolina. I pray for those people because I have no idea how they're going to recover fully. Yes. hope that they would listen to the elections officials who actually run elections and take their counsel, as they have failed to do so far. But the main thing that we're focused on is the reason you don't change these rules this late. And we don't have a court of competent jurisdiction that has ruled on these yet. I think the first hearing we have upcoming is on October 16th on some of these rules, and we're waiting for McBurney to come back with another ruling. We can't expend limited resources on something that may not even happen right now, so we have to wait until it happens. I think the effective date is October 22nd, so we don't know if it exists. So we don't necessarily try to deal with things that don't actually exist yet. And we understand that many people feel like they are doing things to help secure the election and increase people's faith in the outcome of the election. Unfortunately, at the same time, they're undermining other people's faith in the election, so is it a balancing act on that front? So I would hope that they would consider that, because the reason you can't change how you process ballots this late is it's next to impossible to train for. You're asking for human error. You're asking for conspiracy theories. It's a difficult situation overall, even though I think people are attempting to do things that they all believe is correct. Anything else? Archith, you already had one, but okay.
With some of these changes, how do we anticipate results?
Well, that was one of the good things in SB 189. Basically, all early votes and every processed absentee vote has to be reported by 8 p.m.?
8 p.m.
8 p.m. on election night. So we will have the majority of votes in. Unfortunately, we are a swing state, which means that we could be a very close race. So we don't know what it's going to be on that front, and there's going to be absentee ballots that come in up to 7 o'clock on election day. They're going to have to be processed. You're going to have election day votes that have to be processed, but by midnight that night, we should have what we call the denominator. We should know how many votes have been cast in every form, except maybe a handful of the absentees, because we won't have a full processing of those in the larger counties. So we'll have the vast majority in on election night, just like we did in 2022 and just like we did in 2020. The problem is when the margin is 10,779, which takes them, or 11,779, which takes them ahead for some reason, it's going to be close all the way through. Yeah.
700 absentee ballots.
Less than. This is the mail. It's the mail. Basically, there's a handful of offices that are still officially closed, so they're not processing through those right now. But it's less than, like I said, less than 700. About half of them are in Richmond County, so they have other alternative post offices. Or we can use UPS, or another thing we discussed with the post office is what happens in many hurricanes and tornadoes. Post office will hold mail, and individuals can come, show their ID, and pick their mail up. And we do have Ballot Scout running this year, so you can track your ballot and know where it is in the process. And to cover the question about absentee voting versus not absentee voting, if you absentee vote, I strongly encourage you sign up for Ballot Scout so you can get notifications of where your ballot is. And if it gets to be Thursday, Friday, before the Tuesday election, maybe you think about going and voting early if it hasn't been processed yet. That's why we have that technology there for, because you still can. Just because you mailed it doesn't mean you're done. All right, what else? I punched everybody out? All right, thank y'all.